My world was woven from noise. I, Leo Vance, a sound engineer, lived and worked in the epicenter of Chicago's perpetual roar. My ears, my primary tool, would literally ache with strain by the end of the day. Sirens, the rumble of the L train, shouts from the street. This sonic chaos was both my job and my curse. Silence had become more than a luxury for me. It was an obsession, an almost physical need. Standard solutions like earplugs or regular noise-canceling headphones offered only a pathetic substitute, unable to muffle the low-frequency hum that seemed to penetrate straight to my bones. And then, the marketers promised me a miracle. Or a zero. Online, people spoke of them with bated breath, calling the technology a quantum leap. They were based on some kind of field phase inverter that created an acoustic vacuum around the head. The slogan was simple and hit the mark perfectly. Hear yourself? They promised not just silence, but its absolute form. The price was astronomical, but another project ruined by street construction was the final straw. This was an investment in my sanity. The box the courier delivered was a work of art, perfectly black, heavy, with a single silver zero on the lid. Inside, nestled on black velvet, they rested. Matte metal, the softest ear cups. I sat in my chair, my back to the window through which the city's familiar roar seeped. I took a deep breath and put on the headphones. The world switched off. It didn't just get quiet. It vanished. It was shocking. My brain, accustomed to a constant bombardment of sounds, desperately tried to find something to latch onto, but found nothing. An absolute, primordial void. I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. I could hear my own breathing, deafening, like that of a giant. I held my breath, and then it arrived. True silence. The physical tension that had been building up in my shoulders for years began to recede. For the first time in a long time, I could think clearly, without interference. I sat like that for about 20 minutes, savoring the newfound peace. And then, at the very edge of perception, I caught something. It wasn't a sound in the usual sense. More like its shadow. A fleeting sensation, as if someone very far away had whispered a single word. Indecipherable, like the rustle of a dry leaf in a sealed room. I froze, holding my breath again. I must have imagined it. An auditory hallucination. The brain, unaccustomed to such a vacuum, creates phantom sounds on its own. I tried to ignore it, but now I was involuntarily listening into the void. And I heard it again. This time, it seemed a little closer. As if someone were speaking behind a thick velvet curtain, and only a hint of intonation reached me. Tearing the headphones off, I was deafened. The city's roar crashed down on me with the fury of a tsunami, striking my eardrums. It was physically painful. I winced and hastily put the Aura Zeros back on. The blissful, enveloping silence returned. But now there was something new in it. Expectation. I sat for another hour, but the whisper didn't return. It must have been my imagination after all. I put the headphones back in their box. The city outside continued to roar, but it no longer bothered me. I had a button to turn off the world. And along with the sense of relief came another feeling, a faint, almost imperceptible unease. What was that whisper in the perfect silence? And why did I feel like it had called my name? For the next few days, the Aura Zeros became my salvation and my main work tool. I would immerse myself in silence for 8 to 10 hours a day, and my productivity skyrocketed. Audio tracks that used to take me hours to clean up were now done in minutes. I could hear the slightest defects, clicks, and distortions that were previously drowned out by the ambient noise. My clients were thrilled. "Leo, this is your best work yet, the sound is crystal clear. How do you do it?" they wrote. I felt like a magician. The whisper did not return. I convinced myself that it was indeed a phantom, born from my exhausted hearing during its first encounter with the absolute void. My brain had adapted, gotten used to the new state, and the hallucinations had stopped. I even began to enjoy this perfect isolation. I could completely control my sound environment. But after a week, everything changed. I was working on a difficult order, restoring an old audio recording of a lecture. The lecturer's voice was quiet, full of static. I put on the or zeros and turned the volume almost to maximum, trying to catch every word. I was extremely focused, sitting motionless, holding my breath. And in a pause between the lecturer's phrases, I heard it again. This time, it was closer. Clearer. It was no longer just a hint of intonation. It was a word. Listen. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly turned the volume down. Silence. Deep and penetrable. I sat for several minutes, my heart pounding in my chest. Did I imagine it? Again? But why that specific word? Listen. I started experimenting. In the evening, after finishing work, I put on the headphones again, sat in my chair, and tried to completely relax, to clear my mind. I sat motionless, barely breathing, and listened into the void. A minute 5. Nothing. I was about to conclude that it was just a consequence of overwork when it happened again. Closer. This time the word was different. And it felt even closer than before. As if it had been whispered right behind my back. But the sound was filtered, stripped of all frequencies except its very essence. I tore off the headphones and spun around. An empty room, bathed in the dim light of the night city. No one. Paranoia began to take root. By day, I was a sound genius. By night, I was becoming a man who listened to silence, waiting to hear voices. I started searching for information. Not about the or zeros, they still received nothing but praise. I was looking for information on the effect of absolute silence on the human brain. I came across articles about sensory deprivation, about how people in anechoic chambers start to see and hear things that aren't there. This calmed me down a bit. I wasn't going crazy. My brain just couldn't handle the lack of external stimuli. But the whisper became more insistent. It now appeared almost every time I immersed myself in silence for a long period. The words were simple, monosyllabic. Hear, see, help. They were devoid of emotion, cold, and detached. I tried to talk back, first in my mind then aloud. But there was no response. Only these fragments of phrases, emerging from nowhere. One night something happened that shattered my hallucination theory. I was lying on the couch with the headphones on, trying to fall asleep under the blanket of perfect silence. The city's hum no longer bothered me, but now the anticipation of the whisper kept me tense. And it came. Cold. And in that same instant I felt it. Not with my ears, but with my skin. A real, tangible cold swept through the room. Not just a draft. It was a wave of icy air that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I opened my eyes. The thermostat on the wall showed a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit. But the cold was real. It enveloped me for a few seconds while the silent whisper sounded, and then vanished along with it. I sat up on the couch, trembling. This was no longer a game of the mind. A hallucination can't change the temperature of a room. This was something else. Something real. And the headphones weren't just a device that blocks sound. They were a key. A door. They were removing the noise of our world, allowing something from elsewhere to seep through. And that something had noticed me. Fear is a poor advisor, but an excellent motivator. I could no longer just passively wait for my invisible interlocutor to deign to throw me another icy crumb of its presence. I needed answers, and as a sound engineer, I decided to approach the problem professionally. If a sound exists, even one this anomalous, it can be recorded. The next evening, I turned my studio into a laboratory. I set up my most sensitive condenser microphone right in front of me. I connected it to a preamp, routed the signal to my computer, and started a recording program. The audio track showed a perfect straight line. The microphone was only picking up the room's ambient noise, which I couldn't hear. Everything was ready. I put on the or zeros and plunged into the familiar vacuum. This time, I didn't wait. I decided to provoke contact. "Who are you?" I asked aloud. My own voice, devoid of the room's reverberation, sounded muffled and unnatural. Silence. On the monitor, a straight line. "What do you want?" I asked again, trying to speak as clearly as possible. And then I heard the answer. It didn't come immediately, but with a slight delay, as if it needed time to form from nothing. "Open." The whisper was clearer than ever. It sounded right in the center of my consciousness. I looked at the monitor. A straight line. Not the slightest spike. The program had recorded absolutely nothing. My heart sank. This sound did not exist in the physical world. It arose somewhere between the headphones and my brain, or directly within it. I tore off the headphones. The silence in the room seemed deafening after the absolute vacuum. I played back the recording. The quiet background noise and my two questions, sounding pathetic and foolish in the empty room. There was no answer on the recording. Obsession replaced fear. If I couldn't record it, I had to study it. I dove back into the internet, but this time I wasn't looking for articles on psychology, but for information about the Aura Zeros themselves. I dug deeper than the promotional reviews. I searched for geek forums, tech blogs, any mention of the field phase inverter. Most of the information was just a rehash of marketing brochures. But after several hours of searching through the darkest corners of the web, I found it. It was a single post on a long-abandoned forum for audio engineers, dated 6 months ago. A user with the nickname Cassandra wrote, "Has anyone else noticed the echo in the zero channel on the auras? Doesn't seem like standard artifacts. It's like a residual signal with no source. The company doesn't respond to inquiries. They deleted my post from the official forum in 3 minutes." Below was a single reply. "Dude, you've been sitting in silence for too long. Go get some fresh air." And that was it. Nothing more. But to me, that message was like a flash of lightning in the dark. A residual signal with no source. This person, whoever they were, had heard the same thing I had. And the company knew about it. They were deleting such posts. Now I knew 2 things. First, I wasn't crazy. And second, I had gotten myself into something far more serious than just buying expensive headphones. The technology one held in my hands had a side effect that the manufacturer was desperately trying to keep quiet. And that side effect was starting to take an unhealthy interest in me. The name, Cassandra, became my only clue, my beacon in a sea of paranoia. Finding an anonymous user on an abandoned forum was a near impossible task, but the alternative was silent madness, and I chose the former. I began to methodically scour the internet. For hours on end, I typed combinations into the search engine. Cassandra, Aura Zero, Phase Inverter Zero Channel Echo. The results were meager. Mostly, the links led back to the same dead forum or to advertising sites. I didn't give up. I started searching by the nickname. Cassandra. Suddenly it hit me. Cassandra, the prophetess from Greek myths whose predictions no one believed. What a bitter irony. This person had tried to warn others, but was ridiculed and ignored. The whisper in the headphones didn't stop, but it changed. It now seemed to react to my actions. When I opened another promising link that led to a dead end, I heard a quiet, almost mocking laugh, like the rustle of sand. And one night, when I was particularly close to giving up, I heard a distinct, "Not alone." It was strange. Frightening, but at the same time, encouraging? As if the creature on the other side of silence was playing some incomprehensible game with me. The breakthrough came on the 4th day of searching. I found the same nickname. Cassandra, on a portfolio website for software developers. The profile was almost empty, but in one of the old comments on a project about audio signal processing, I found what I was looking for. Another user addressed Cassandra, by name. "Elin, could you take a look at this code?" Elin. Using that name and the technical details from the profile, I was able to find her blog. Elin Rivers. A brilliant signal processing engineer, a former employee of a major tech company with close ties to acoustics development. Bingo. The contact page listed an email address. My fingers trembled as I typed the email. I tried to be as brief and convincing as possible, so as not to sound like another lunatic. Subject, or zero in the zero-channel echo. Body. Hello, Elin. I found your post on the Audio Engineers Forum. I know it was written a long time ago, but I've encountered the same thing. The residual signal with no source. Only I don't just hear it. It's talking to me. I am a sound engineer, and I am not crazy. Please, if you know what this is, reply. Sincerely, Leo Vance. I reread the text 10 times, then squeezed my eyes shut and hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void. I leaned back in my chair, feeling completely drained. I put on the or zeros to disconnect from the world for just a moment. Silence enveloped me. But there was no peace in it anymore. Only tense, ringing anticipation. I closed my eyes. And at that moment, louder and clearer than ever before, a single word sounded directly in my head, full of icy disapproval. Mistake. I slept in fits and starts, constantly checking my email. The reply came the next morning. It was short, devoid of greetings or pleasantries, and reeked of panic. Subject, or zero in the zero-channel echo. Body. Delete this email. Do not write to me at this address. Ever. If you want to talk, use the secure messenger signal. My number is phone number. You have 24 hours. Then I'm changing it. My heart hammered. This was it. Not a dismissal, not silence. This was the reaction of a frightened person who knew what I was facing. I downloaded Signal, entered the number with trembling hands, and sent a short message. This is Leo Vance. The response was almost instantaneous. Calling in 5 minutes. Be alone. I walked through the apartment, checking that the door was locked. I sat down at the table, placing the or zeros in front of me. On some perverse impulse, I put them on a few seconds before the call. Silence. Ringing tense. And within it, the familiar whisper began to stir. The phone vibrated in my hand. I answered the call and put it on speaker. Mr. Vance? The woman's voice on the other end was quiet, strained. Yes. It's me. Elin? I don't have much time, and I don't know who might be listening. She began, speaking quickly. What you're hearing, we called it the echo effect in the lab. It's not interference, and it's not a hallucination. I listened, holding my breath. The or zero technology is a byproduct of a classified research project called Silos. She continued. The official goal was to create a filter capable of cutting out all known cosmic and terrestrial noise to hear, well, let's just say, the background radiation of the universe itself. We wanted to hear the sound of the Big Bang. She paused, and I heard her swallow nervously. We created perfect silence. But what was in it wasn't the hum of the universe. It was something. A signal. Structured, complex. It reacted to us. We thought we had discovered a new form of communication. In reality, we had just punched a hole in a prison wall and listened to what was sitting inside. A coldness, unrelated to the room's temperature, crept up my spine again. These entities, Elin struggled for words. They aren't physical. They exist in that void. Ancient, intelligent, and hungry. Not in our sense. They crave contact, information, experiences. They want out. In my head, against the backdrop of her voice, the whisper grew more insistent. She is lying. What happened next? I managed to ask. Management saw commercial potential. Project Silos was shut down, and the technology was simplified, cheapened, and released to the market as or zero. They knew about the side effect but considered it a statistical anomaly. Rare cases that could easily be blamed on the user's mental instability. When I tried to raise an alarm, I was fired and forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement under threat of litigation. Your unit, Mr. Vance, is probably one where the phase inverter was too stable. You've created a perfect, clean channel for them. Do not trust her. Rustled in the silence. They're talking to me right now, I said into the phone. They say you're lying. There was silence on the other end of the line. I heard her ragged breathing. Oh God, Elin whispered. They're already that deep. They're listening to us. Learning. Leo, remember this, they always lie. Their only goal is to use your mind as a bridge, a beachhead to cross into our world. You have to. And at that moment, what came through my headphones was not a whisper. It was a deafening, piercing shriek, like the screech of metal on glass, amplified 1,000 times. It struck my brain directly, forcing me to rip the headphones off and scream in pain. When the shriek subsided, there was only a dial tone from the phone. The call had been cut. I sat in the crushing silence of my studio. On the table lay the Aura Zeros. Smooth, black, perfect. And for the first time, I looked at them with true horror. This wasn't a door I could open or close. It was an open wound between worlds. And something from the other side had already pushed its hand through. My first instinct was to destroy them. Burn them, smash them with a hammer, dissolve them in acid. I grabbed the headphones from the table. The metal was cold, almost icy to the touch. I had already raised them over the trash can when a sharp knock made me jump. Not at the door. The knock came from the window. Loud, distinct, as if someone had rapped their knuckles against the glass. I froze. My studio was on the 17th floor. Slowly, afraid to breathe, I turned my head. Outside the window, there was nothing but the night sky and the lights of Chicago. No construction cradles, no ledges. The knock came again, more insistent this time, right in front of my face. And though I saw nothing, I felt that someone was there, beyond the glass. Someone drawn by my fear. I stumbled back from the window, dropping the headphones. They hit the carpet with a dull thud. At the same moment, the knocking stopped. Panic began to flood my mind. I realized a terrible truth. It wasn't about the headphones anymore. They were just the catalyst, the key that had been turned in the lock. Now the door was open, and it led directly to me. The connection had been established. I desperately tried to cling to reality. I turned on every light in the apartment, cranked my speakers to full blast, heavy metal, a symphony orchestra, anything to leave no pocket of silence. But it didn't help anymore. The noise was just a background. And underneath it, at the very edge of perception, I began to hear it. The same whisper. It was with me always now, even without the Aura Zeros. Faint, barely discernible, like the ringing in your ears after a loud concert. It wasn't outside anymore. It had seeped inside. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, head in my hands, trying to drown out the whisper with music. At one point I looked up at the dark screen of the turned-off television. And I saw it. For a split second, the black glass reflected not just my room, but something else. A tall, dark figure standing right behind my shoulder. It was featureless, woven from static, from darkness itself. I whipped around, no one. But the icy sensation of another's presence remained. By morning, I was on the verge of a breakdown. Exhausted, sleep-deprived, haunted by a shadow and a whisper. I fell into a heavy, sticky doze right in my chair. I had a dream. I was standing in the middle of a perfectly white, endless room. There was nothing around but an oppressive, perfect silence. And I was not alone. From the white void, the same dark figure slowly approached me. It didn't walk but seemed to float, and with its every movement, a sound was born in the silence. That same chilling screech of metal on glass. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. My voice was swallowed by the vacuum. The figure reached out to me with something that might have been a hand. I woke up to the vibration of my phone. I jumped up, breathing heavily. On the screen was a message and signal from an unknown number. They know we spoke. Destroy the headphones. Immediately. But it might not stop them. They've attached themselves to your consciousness. I'm coming to you. We need to build a cage of noise. It was Elin. I looked at the headphones lying on the floor. They no longer looked like a high-tech device. They looked like bait that had already done its job. And now the predator had come for me. Elin arrived 3 hours later. She was a short, thin woman in her 40s with tired but incredibly intelligent eyes and short-cropped gray hair. She hauled 2 heavy equipment cases into the apartment, and without a word, first thing she did was take out 4 small devices and place them in the corners of my studio. Pressing a button on a remote, she filled the room with a low, vibrating hum. It wasn't just noise. It was a complex, multi-layered sound pattern that seemed to make the very air vibrate. A sonic barrier, she explained, seeing my questioning look. Primitive, but it should muffle them a bit. Buy us some time. And it was true. The nagging whisper in my head, while not gone completely, receded into the background, becoming like a distant echo. Thank you, I forced out, feeling the first relief in the last 24 hours. Don't thank me yet, she cut in, opening the second case. Inside was a prototype of some device, a mess of wires, and a laptop. We have to fight silence with sound. Not just any noise, but concentrated, structured chaos. If they exist in zero, we have to make that zero uninhabitable. Her plan was brilliant in its madness. She explained that the phase inverter in the headphones creates a perfect sine wave that cancels out external sounds. The entities from the void use this smooth, predictable wave as a bridge. To destroy the bridge, we needed to send an opposing, incorrect, wave down it, a complex, asynchronous signal that would cause the zero channel to collapse. We're going to build a cage of noise, she said, connecting wires to my equipment. It won't destroy them, but it should slam the doors shut with a deafening crash. Sever the connection. We worked non-stop. My studio turned into a command center. Elin directed the process, and I, using my skills, helped her generate and modulate the necessary frequencies. It was the most complex audio track of my life. Dozens of layers of white, pink, and brown noise laid on top of each other with a phase shift, and over it all, an unpredictable, arrhythmic ultrasonic pulse. The entity felt what we were doing, and it fought back. First, the lights went out. Elin calmly pulled a flashlight from her bag, and we continued working on the laptop's battery. Then a wave of icy cold swept through the room, causing frost to form on the monitors. We bundled up in jackets and kept going. The most terrifying attack was aimed at me. I was sitting at the mixing console, adjusting the final layer of frequencies, when the whisper in my head suddenly became clear and loud, breaking through Elin's protective hum. "She's using you, Leo." It sounded, mimicking my own voice. "When this is over, she'll take the technology, and they'll get rid of you as a witness. Look at her, she's not afraid of them, she's afraid you'll tell the truth." I froze, my fingers hovering over a dial. I looked at Elin. She was focused on her laptop, her face tense. The seed of doubt, planted in my exhausted mind, began to sprout. What did I know about her? Nothing. "Leo, what's wrong?" she asked, not looking up from the screen. "Kill her before she kills you." The voice hissed in my head. My hand moved on its own toward the heavy microphone on its stand. I grabbed it. The metal was cold in my palm. "Leo!" Elin shouted, finally looking up at me. There was no fear in her eyes. There was understanding. She slowly raised her hand holding the remote and cranked the power of the sonic barrier to maximum. A deafening, almost painful roar filled the room. The voice in my head choked, replaced by the same shriek I had heard on the phone. I cried out, dropping the microphone, and fell to my knees, clutching my ears. When the roar subsided, I was breathing heavily. Elin stood over me. "Hang on, Leo," she said quietly. "It's trying to break you. We're almost there." I got up, shaking. Now I knew this thing was capable of anything. An hour later, everything was ready. 4 powerful studio monitors were arranged in a circle around the chair in the center of the room. They were all connected to Elin's laptop, which was loaded with our cage of noise. "We only get one shot," she said, looking me in the eyes. "To catch it in the trap, we need live bait. You're going to have to put them on again, Leo. Open the channel wide and let it in." I sat in the chair, positioned in the center of the sound trap. The air hummed from the operating barrier generators. Elin stood by the laptop, her finger poised over the enter key. She nodded at me. I looked at the Aura Zero headphones resting on my lap. They now looked like a predatory insect coiled to strike. My hands wouldn't obey. It took all my courage to bring them to my head. "I'm ready, Leo." Elan's voice was tense. "As soon as it makes full contact, I'm launching. Hold on with all your might." I took one last deep breath, feeling the vibration of the protective hum, and put on the headphones. The world switched off. But this time, the void was not empty. It was alive. I was immediately in that same white space from my dream. Before me stood the dark, distorted figure woven from static. It was no longer hiding. It was waiting for me. At last. The whisper rustled, but now it wasn't just a sound in my head. It was a thought. Its thought inside my head. I could feel it seeping into me, exploring my memories, fears, hopes. It was disgusting, like icy spider legs crawling through the corners of my consciousness. "You are so lonely, Leo," it continued, taking the form of my father, who had died many years ago. "You don't need this woman, you need silence, peace. I can give you that, we can be together, forever." The figure held out a hand to me. The temptation was almost overwhelming. The exhaustion, the fear, the loneliness, it all weighed on me, and the prospect of eternal peace seemed like salvation. I almost took a step forward. "Leo, now!" Elan's cry reached me not as a sound, but as a distant, fading spark of reality. I clung to that spark. "No!" I screamed in my mind, recoiling from the figure. "Get out of my head!" "Fool!" The shadow hissed, its form beginning to distort, losing its human features, twisting into something screeching and many-limbed. "You are already mine!" And in that instant, Elan hit the key. The white room of my consciousness exploded. The sonic chaos we had created burst in, a deafening cacophony of crackling, shrieking, and roaring. It was as if a freight train had crashed into a universe of silence. The dark figure thrashed in agony, torn apart by the sound waves. It let out a silent scream of hatred and pain that I felt in every cell of my body. And then it was over. I woke up on the floor of my studio, having thrown off the headphones. Elan was leaning over me. The protective hum was off. The room was filled with ordinary, familiar silence. "Did it work?" I rasped. "The channel collapsed," she said, helping me sit up. Relief was written all over her face. "There's no feedback. We did it. We locked the door." I stood up, swaying. I listened. To myself. To the silence in the room. The whisper was gone. For the first time in days, my head was quiet. Truly quiet. I almost cried with relief. The next day, Elan left, taking her equipment and the Aura Zeros, which had been smashed to dust with a hammer. We agreed never to speak of it again. A week went by. I returned to work, but I no longer sought silence. I played music, opened the windows, letting the noise of the city fill my life. Everything was fine. I had almost convinced myself the nightmare was over. But one night, I woke up in the complete silence of my bedroom. There was no sound of cars, no hum of the air conditioner. Just silence. And in that silence, right inside my own head, I heard a familiar, icy whisper. It was quiet, almost gentle, but filled with triumphant glee. "You locked the door, but I remained inside.